For coming, all who are here, who are in the other room, and others who are listening in the building. I want to thank all of you for coming. Had we anticipated this turnout, we would have asked everyone to actually move downstairs to a larger facility, but we're happy to see you nonetheless, and we look forward to moving this agenda as quickly and promptly as appropriate. And I just want everybody to be comfortable, and thank you. As some of you may know, I've been out for a little bit. I've been sick, so this is my first day back. I'm happy to be back. I'm joined by my colleague, the Honorable Assemblyman, Councilman, Great Bruin, Mr. Fuentes, and with his assistance, we're going to move this agenda promptly. So I thank all of you for being here. With that said, can we look at items 1 through 3 on consent?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I can just read those items quickly into the record. Item 1 is a housing and CO report relative for a regional affordable housing listing service. Item 2 is a housing and CO report relative to the Wilshire Tower Apartments project bond issuance. And item 3 is a housing and CO report relative to the accepting the traffic safety grant from the state.
I'd move those items, Mr. Chair.
Moved, and so be the order.
And for the record, that would be the CAO recommendations.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Item number 4 is a matter related to cap and trade.
Item number 4, Mr. Chair, motion bond and for Cedillo Busquina relative to an instruction to the Housing Department to report on the recently approved affordable housing and sustainable communities program regulations.
Okay, let's hear from the Housing Department.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Rushmore Cervantes with the Housing and Community Investment Department. As you know, we've been working closely with this committee as well as the council to review the cap and trade guidelines that were adopted last week. The council supported some recommended changes to the cap and trade proposals. At this time, as they've been codified, there are still a lot of unanswered questions, but two of the primary things that we were looking to do to change the process were the cap of $15 million per area, primarily. That really limits our ability, and equally as important was the inability for the cities to actually have control of the project. So what that means is, as developers can actually apply directly to the state of California for those assets, they will, in one way, shape, or form, have to coordinate with the city, whether it be through the Housing and Community Investment Department or through Metro or some of the other public works transportation departments. So there's still going to be a heavy amount of reliance on the department or the city or Metro. Now, the Metro Board has recently released a document looking for memorandums of understanding with any developers that are wishing to apply for cap and trade dollars. We are working with the CLA's office to come up with a proposal that would have the City of Los Angeles engage in a similar type of MOU intentions with the Metro Board to ensure that there is a seamless coordination between Metro as well as the City of Los Angeles as projects are being submitted to the state of California for those projects. Now, as it relates to the threshold as far as greenhouse gas emissions reductions, is still not clear at this point what that looks like, what the particular guidelines are. So in as much as there's been a lot of discussion about what those policies are, we're not clear yet, and those still have to be vetted. The deadline, I believe, I don't have the dates on offhand. The staff person that was going to be making the presentation is not here right now, but I believe it's next month when the proposals are going to be opened up, and I think early April is when the actual proposals are due. So the first run will be going out. Again, $15 million is the maximum amount that will be available the first go-around, and then thereafter there will be subsequent opportunities in ensuing years to be able to amend the proposal, and that's what the state of California has indicated. They would be amenable to changes down the line as they learn more about the communities and how the program has worked. I will make a note, though, that I shouldn't say though, is that right now they're operating, the grand total is about $865 million for the state, broken down into 11 different programs. They're going to include, starting this year, January 1st of this year, include petroleum and gas as a part of the tax. So the estimate is going to be in between $2.5 to $3 billion to be made available. So again, broken down amongst the 11 categories. So there will be a larger windfall of resources being able to come to the city. But again, from our perspective, we'd like to have better control so that we can align our resources more appropriately with our managed pipeline as well as the other resources that are being made available around the city as well as with Metro. And of course, we'd like to be able to have a larger allocation than $15 million. Because so if you compare the city of LA to, as an example, city of Santa Monica or Pasadena or any other city, not to pick on those, but the fact is that you just look at the sheer size of that entity versus ours, that's not a fair comparison. So as we look into subsequent opportunities to make amendments to the cap and trade guidelines, we're going to work very closely with this committee to ensure that we are leveraging our political capital to make those changes to get more resources and more control of those resources in the ensuing rounds. So with that, I think that concludes. Do you have any other comments?
Dora Huerta with the Office of the Chief Legislative Analyst. As Rushmore mentioned, we are working under a very compressed timeline for awarding the program funds. There'll be a process by which an eligible applicant will submit a concept proposal, and only upon invitation will they be allowed to submit a final proposal for funding. We feel it's in the best interest of the city to participate in making recommendations for funding. We're working closely with HSID on ways we can work with our departments as well as outside organizations who are also looking to apply for funding to present the strongest recommendations for funding. Some of the deadlines that are coming up very, very quickly. On the 30th of January, the council will be releasing its NOFA, and by the 19th, concept proposals are due. By March 11th, they'll send out an invitation for applicants to submit the full application. So we're looking at February 19th coming up very, very quickly.
Okay.
Here for any other questions or comments you may have.
So I couldn't agree with you more. The $15 million sort of cap is a real sort of concern. And so I understand we took the position, happened to be on the same day that the Strategic Growth Council was going to make a determination, and that's unfortunate. So the hope is that it gets amended as more experience guides the SGC, and hopefully will fare better. Is there an opportunity for exemptions to the $15 million cap? Is there a way for us to sort of petition them to consider doing more in this first round?
At this point, we have not seen any wiggle room for exemptions. We have not seen any exemption language. We can continue to see this, other alternatives. But from what we've seen as staff and other experts are reviewing, combing through these guidelines, we've not seen it yet, but we'll certainly report back any type of exemptions or loopholes or anything that we can gain a better advantage.
Sure. Especially since I think the intended purpose of those dollars were to mitigate emissions, and if we're not going to do it on a per capita basis, it's really bad for Los Angeles. The co-application, co-management, I think is incredibly important. So the NOFA that CLA just mentioned, the idea it wasn't clear to me. The idea is that we're going to essentially advertise folks to partner with and then go to hand in hand to the SGC and say, here's sort of who we're working with so that we get more consideration, hopefully?
That is the idea. We would like to be able to, I think it'd behoove developers of projects in the city to partner with the city of LA. They can go on their own, obviously, but I think that, and we don't necessarily have a tremendous influence at this point based on the current set of processes that are in place, but I think that if we petitioned SCAG in particular, who has a level of influence along with the state, to be able to indicate that the city really has other resources that it can leverage and partner with developers, I think that we can make a stronger position even without the processes being in place right now.
And understanding that it's an accelerated sort of deadline, do you all have a sort of sense for what the NOFA will look like? Are we going to sort of try to do a TOD this go around? Are we going to look at certain parts of the city of Los Angeles? I mean, the whole idea of co-application means co-management so that we can better leverage our efforts. Where are you all looking in this first round?
Well,
Indiana construction.
they are all supposed to be TOD specific, and we already have a number of projects that are in our pipeline. We'll look to them to, where appropriate, to apply so they can augment the projects that have already been submitted and be able to offset other resources and make them more competitive and actually perhaps have them go sooner. So any projects in the future would also still be TOD that we may or may not have in our pipeline at this time. So if you recall in prior conversations we've got 31 projects in the pipeline that are good for about 2 years. We're going to be coming forward to this committee in the next couple of weeks with some options to present to you that will talk about how we open that up in the future. Again, some TOD, some not TOD. But as it relates to this particular tranche of money for cap and trade, it really pretty much have to be specific to TODs for, again, what's in the pipeline now, but also in the future. So there could be some nuances that perhaps we could deviate from that, but I know that you particular Councilman Fuentes, are concerned or are interested in hearing what those other options are relative to non-TOD specific, and of course we've got other sources of monies that will be coming this way relative, like Prop 41 and others that we're looking at to be able to even the playing field.
Got it. Thank you.
Certainly.
Just let me say that I share and support the concerns of Mr. Fuentes, particularly those should not be disadvantaged around the non-TLD because of, we all sit in this basin. I mean, I made efforts to speak to one of our representatives on the council. Unfortunately, he could not make it, but I was in the Capitol last week and spent time and ran into people. I think we all agree that there has to be a greater allotment for the city. It's a new program, and so we'll, we don't want to push the sand around too much at the very beginning, but I think it's imperative that the city of LA, we get our fair share. And I think ultimately, given the heft of resources that we have, that we should be.
And I think to that end, we are well positioned, considering Measure R dollars and the rail that's coming in. We can certainly demonstrate better leverage than pretty much any municipality in the state of California.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to add that that through the process of commenting on the draft regulations, the city did actually make some headway. And the big one was that we were able to eliminate the minimum unit count from 100 to no minimum at all.
Mm-hmm.
And that what ended up happening is it allowed a lot of our pipeline projects to qualify. And so I think that's just one example of how a continuous advocacy to make sure that the regulations serve our needs can continue.
Okay. Yes.
I actually would also like to add, this is Claudia Monterrosa from the Housing and Community Investment Department, that another really key concern that remains from this is the scoring criteria based on the 55% for GHG emissions that is based on a Cal EEE model that disadvantages affordability. So I think that's one of the things that we need to look forward and really to continue to push the SGC and the council members to really direct the SGC staff to address that issue, in particular with the city of Los Angeles, that we are pushing it for affordable housing, and we have such a great concentration of disadvantaged communities in our city. And that particular model does not advantages our projects because it is an outdated model that does not take into consideration that low-income households are the core transit riders for the public transit system. So that's a really key concern and something that was really loudly stated at last week's Strategic Growth Council hearing.
All right.
So I have, there's no public comment on this matter. We don't have any cards.
There are no cards on this item.
Thank you. I have instructions for HCID and CLA to coordinate a working group with all relevant departments, report back. Instructions for CLA and HCID to report back on the prioritized projects. And then have the CLA in conjunction with HCID to work on an MOU between SCAG and Metro in terms of how we move forward. And we can approve and move this to council. Is that good?
Thank you for the time.
Thank you guys very much.
That brings us to, would you like to go to item 5, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Item 5 is a motion, Buscaino-Cedillo, relative to the commitment of 10% of the city's future community development block grant funds for the Jordan Downs Transformation Plan.
Okay.
Oh, the HACLA staff?
Who's up?
Yeah. Item 5. Here they come.
Can we have HECLA? Where are they? Oh, here they come.
I see CD 15.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
for
Madam.
clarification, are we moving item number 4 forward to council?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. As amended.
So we got a chair for you over here. You haven't been gone that long. Okay.
Thank you. My name is John King. I'm the Director of Policy and Planning for the Housing Authority of the City of Los Angeles. Thank you for your consideration of this motion before you regarding the Choice Neighborhoods Implementation Grant that the Housing Authority is reapplying for in conjunction with the City of Los Angeles. I think also there's some clarifying language that I think Mr. Roberts will be sharing with the committee, because there was some confusion to begin with as it relates to the amount of dollars that we're asking for to be committed and how that relates to over the next 5 years. So perhaps we could clarify that now, or would you like to come back to that at the end?
David Roberts, again, Director for Economic Development and Planning for Councilman Joe Buscaino, handed to the City Clerk some substitute language for the motion that was actually introduced in Council a few weeks ago. I could read that into the record if you'd like, or if you want to. For the record, just want to substitute the following recommendation in the first moving clause contained in the motion. It should read that the council, subject to the approval of the mayor, allocate in CDBG funds over the next 5 years an amount equal to 10% of the 40th program year for 2014 through 15 of the city's CDBG entitlement, valued at approximately $5,109,000 and to the Jordan Downs Transformation Plan, subject to the grant award under the Department of Housing and Urban Development Choice Neighborhood Initiative Implementation Grant. Secondly, we also need to add an additional recommendation that the council approve the city as a co-applicant along with HACLA, the lead applicant for the Choice Neighborhood Implementation Grant, and authorize the mayor or designee to sign the grant application on behalf of the city. And again, both these amendments are out there to ensure that we comply with the guidelines issued by the Department of Housing and Urban Development for this Choice Neighborhood application. Without these, without these two items for the funding requirement and the co-applicant status from the city, we would be ineligible to apply Jordan Downs and Watts for the Choice Neighborhood Implementation Grant.
Mr. Roberts, you read 40th year. Did you mean 42nd year, or are we going back to last?
It's asking for the current year, so we're currently in the 40th program year.
We're in year 41.
So the requirements through HUD is that the 10% be calculated based on the current year that we're in. So the money, the year that we have money in hand. So it's the 40th year.
40th year.
So which one's April 1st through March 31st?
14.
14 through 15.
Okay. Okay. HSID agree with that? Because I thought we were talking about year 42 daughter. Over 5 years, but beginning year 40th year.
But the beginning of the allocation would be starting in the 42nd year.
Okay.
But the calculation for how much it would
Begins
be.
in this year.
It's
Got it.
it's
Okay,
calculated
so
based on
That's the
40th.
clarification on the previous.
Sorry, the allocation begins in the 41st year, and it's over 5 years. Oh, for the record, Heather Anderson, Planning Deputy, Councilman Buscaino.
And I love CD15, but I'd love to hear HSID say that they concur with that. Mr. Cervantes, come on up.
Please.
This is the mayor's consolidated plan. We administer the consolidated plan on behalf of the mayor and, of course, the council. So this is
Ratified
direction.
by the council.
That is correct. So this is, if in fact the Choice Neighborhood Initiative grant would be granted, this is similar to an application that was submitted last year that this is a requirement that this percentage be allocated based on that program year that's being submitted. So if the mayor and council approve this, we would gladly administer that on behalf of the mayor and council.
I get all that. I just want to make sure I got my years straight, because the original motion said that the calculation is based on the 41st year, commencing with the appropriation of the CDBG funds in the 42nd year. Now, so I want to be clear, it's the 40th year calculation.
It is the year in which it's being prepared, this is being submitted, and this program year 40, and it'll be paid over the next 5 years, starting program year 41.
Right.
Got it. Okay.
And that was partly the intent of the substitution, was a clarification on that detail, but also the clarification that this is the 5 million over the 5 years.
5.1 million. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. All right.
There's my-
I've got more questions.
Okay. Go ahead.
Very
Well,
good.
What can we, maybe it's
Present.
appropriate to go ahead and give an overview of this and maybe
would
address
be
some of those
fantastic.
questions beforehand.
So I presented a fact sheet. I hope that you have that. So essentially, this Choice Neighborhoods Initiative implementation grant is one of two major initiatives that HUD provides, a planning grant and implementation. As you may or may not know, we've been working on the planning of Jordan Downs since about 2009 with a lot of robust community involvement and community engagement and planning. One thing that's unique about Choice Neighborhoods Initiative is that it requires that the boundaries of the grant be beyond the footprint of the public housing. So therefore, many of the resources that potentially would be allocated through CDBG today, if we were awarded, would go into the larger neighborhood, not necessarily to support the housing redevelopment component of the project. In your fact sheet, there's a boundary map that kind of demonstrates the boundaries of our application, and you can see that. And so the other thing that's important that David alluded to is that there's a requirement that the city or a unit of local government be the co-applicant in this grant. There are some cities who have since dropped out because of that, and what HUD has found out over the last several years is that if you do not have the city as a co-applicant, many of the big visions and dreams that many housing authorities have don't come to fruition because of the lack of the overall support. And so that's important, one thing that HUD has learned and included here. And then also with the 10% is really contingent upon us being awarded. We're working closely with our team here, the city as the co-applicant, our development partners, Michaels and Bridge, as our housing implementation partners. We're partnering with the Partnership for LA Schools as an education implementation entity, which is required by the grant. Shields for Families, which is our people implementation entity. So there's clearly, through this NOFA, a requirement that you have a well-rounded approach to addressing the issues in the neighborhood and the community with a very strong strategic plan to address those issues. And so the EWDD will be leading the neighborhood implementation efforts with Jenny Scanlon working for us there. And so we're finalizing the grant. It's due February 9th. We plan to submit February 6th. And we're cautiously optimistic that we have, a chance to win. Last year, about 44 applicants applied, and only 3 or 4 were actually awarded. So it's very competitive. We learned some things from last year's application. We had to improve in our surrounding neighborhood strategy, and I think the city and EWDD is assisting us with helping develop and strengthening that neighborhood component. And so those are just some key facts. We also included a couple of diagrams in your fact sheet that show a rendering of the public housing redevelopment site and then the retail development, which is a component of the plan.
Mr. Fuentes?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll just start by saying that I absolutely will support this going through, but I do have some questions. And I wanted to sort of understand, I think you alluded to lessons learned, but did we get any definitive message from the federal government saying what it is that would strengthen our ability to win? My concern is that we're going for the CNI grant, which is federal dollars, and we're leveraging future federal dollars. And so to me, it doesn't seem to make for a compelling case necessarily. In Chicago, I think the folks who won, they actually matched the money with foundation money, and to me that seems like sort of the way to go.
So that's a great question. So essentially, this is just one component of the leverage dollars. We have to actually leverage 3 to 1. So we get 30 million. We have to leverage the 90 million, dollars in different resources. And so we're working very closely with some philanthropic entities. We have LA in Sync, which is a partner assisting us with some leverage resources. Several community-based organizations and others who have kind of reprogrammed and prioritized funding for this grant as well. So it's not simply the CDBG. And the other thing is that we're doing this because it's a requirement of the grant. So this is not something that we just decided would be a good idea for the city to, but the CNI NOFA requires that to get the local CDBG match for the 5 years as just one small slice of the overall leverage and resources that you bring to bear as you apply for this grant.
So what we're applying for is 30 million?
Correct.
And so this is where do we get the 85 million? Sort of. Well, give me some ideas.
So there's some things that you leverage. For example, Jordan High School there's funding that has been approved for that. So over the next 5 years, they will invest an additional 60 million into our target neighborhood. You have the Children's Institute that's building a new facility there in Watts, which is in our target neighborhood. That's additional 15 to 25 million dollars of leverage resources that we have there. There's some other city improvements that are coming with streetscape improvements and other things. We got a grant from Metro Call for Projects for the Century Boulevard build out. So there's a lot. And so HUD really wants to see, and we're very competitive if we can show all these other resources being invested into this neighborhood, not just the CDBG.
And when is sort of all of this due, and when will we have? Because for me, I think it'd be very interesting, as opposed to, and I imagine that we will be successful. But I'd want to know sort of along the way how we're doing, so that way when we're successful here, we can go ahead and start doing this for Nickerson or San Fernando Gardens and places like that. When will we? What are our deadlines?
So essentially, we'll apply on February 6th. Sometime during the summer, we will find out if we're shortlisted, and essentially they'll shortlist a number of applicants, and then HUD will do a site visit. Based on that site visit, they'll finalize the awardees and make a selection that we could be potentially awarded by October of 2015.
What would be great? I know this item's got to move to the council and be approved so that we can codify the action, but at some point it'd be great to get a report back in some other conversation to see how we're doing.
You want to do that? What benchmarks you want to use?
Well, I mean, I think, we'll get signals along the way, so I think it's for the department to sort of share with us that we've made it to the next rung, and these things sort of helped, and these things, other folks who didn't make it, what didn't help them, so we can continue to not just sort of make the dedication at 10%, but learn as we go, so that we continue to do this throughout the city of Los Angeles. But yeah, I mean, the report back can come back whenever we talk about the overall housing element, or some other time when you all report back on how we're doing to solve the housing crisis in Los Angeles.
But he noted some specifics, right? You want to follow that?
No, I think
Get in the list when we get on the short list.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll hear back probably in April, end of first quarter, how we're doing, and by summer for sure. It sounds like.
Okay.
Correct.
Is that good?
Thank you very much. Good luck.
Thank you.
So I'd make the motion that we approve as amended,
Yep.
with the correct program years and allocation formulas.
Second? So be the order. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, and for the record, this item will be in council on Friday, the 30th.
Okay, yeah, we actually have cards.
We have 2 cards.
Yep. We've got Leslie Radford and Becky Dennison.
I'm not sure. We never get public comment after you vote, but I'll just put mine on the record anyway. Interesting concept. So, Yeah, I'm here as part of the Los Angeles Community Action Network. We have a tenant committee in Jordan Downs and actually tenant committees through our housing collective throughout the city. I'm also here with Renters Day LA. We are raising concerns on many items on the agenda. We're opposed to a new CNI application at this point because the issues from last year's application have not been resolved around reduced affordability overall, around the privatization model using a for-profit developer unwilling to lower affordability and bring in more public housing dollars because it doesn't meet their bottom line. It will result in the displacement or potential displacement, particularly of undocumented families, as well as families with certain criminal records. And the city should not allocate 10% of its CDBG money until those issues are resolved, until tenants can have full voice in this plan. We should not be using this as an example for the city until we do it right, and nobody across the country has done a privatization model that didn't result in mass displacement, so we should figure out how to do that first before we're allocating future funds to projects like this.
Thank you. Leslie Radford.
Hi, I'm Leslie Radford with the Los Angeles Anti-Eviction campaign, and we've been active in Jordan Downs as well. Beyond what Becky has explained to you, and we certainly concur with everything she said, I have serious reservations about this particular award. The $5 million is being allocated from other projects and activities that can happen around this city for this community block money. I don't know if it's coming from current allocations to Homeboys or Council District 8 sidewalks or the Celeste King 3 pool or the Latino Theater Company. But these projects are going to suffer because of this, and I don't think that's been taken into consideration. My other concern is the $90 million matches, which we have just been told are being reallocated from existing projects in Watts to fund this matching grant. And I'd like to be clear about what's being sacrificed in order to do this, because this particular project is not about housing, it's about commercial development. And the Jordan Downs project is supposed to be about housing. I don't know how commercial development got prioritized and takes first call on this. Thank you.
Motion's moved.
That takes us to item 6, which is motion relative to establishing linkages between the family source centers and nonprofits that provide immigration services and the provision of immigration services by the family source centers, public libraries, and other departments.
There are no cards on this item.
No cards on this item. Well, there's Mr. Fuentes, there's, as you know, changes taking place on the national level. The county represents 35% of its population are undocumented. It's the highest since 1870 in terms of its immigrant presence, and yet they contribute 40% of the region's GDP and nearly $300 billion to the economy. We're very pleased to note, and there's great elation in the Capitol, that now we're able to provide, after 20 years, driver's licenses for immigrant motorists, something they've been denied since 1993. But yet there's an immense amount of challenges that exist, and I just think that the city has to do all that it can, use its resources, its libraries, its family resource centers, all the entities that it has to create the infrastructure in place, to put it in place, to welcome immigrants to the city today, tomorrow, and to the future. And so with that, let me bring up, who comes up? Manny Chavez? Sir, come on up. Tell us about your efforts of how we're going to make this the friendliest immigrant city in America.
Of course. I'm Manny's bodyguard. That's Robert Sines there. Good afternoon, Manny Chavez with HCID. Since the beginning of Family Source back in 2009, we have established effective relationships with the immigration service providers. And initially, they were formal financial relationships in that we actually subcontracted with the Caresans of the world. Unfortunately, with the funding reductions over the years, our ability to do that has diminished, but nevertheless, those relationships still continue. The real benefit of Family Source is that all we ask is for income eligibility, and city residency. Those are the only things that qualify an individual for participation. So we do get a number of folks that we realize are eligible for DACA and DAPA, but we also acknowledge that our providers are not the experts in determining that eligibility. So it is critical for us to continue working with the immigration service providers. To the credit of Councilmember Fuentes, we just recently had Chirla co-locate at our Pacoima Family Source Center. So that's something we'd like to replicate throughout a number of our Family Source Centers if that's possible. We do have a Family Source RFP that we are drafting. That will become a critical part of that proposal in terms of how we further structure that relationship.
Robert Science, Economic and Workforce Development Department, and we operate the 17 WorkSource centers and the 16 Youth Source centers, and we want to make our facilities available and actually have the integration for information and referrals directly with the immigrant community. Currently, through WIA, you had to have a right to work, so there wasn't a huge number of immigrant populations or undocumented population coming into the centers. But with this expansion and the ability to give work permits, we're anticipating there's approximately 250,000 folks that will be eligible, and we want to make sure that our WorkSource centers and Youth Source centers are encouraging folks to come in and utilize all of our work placement services, and I think that's one of the biggest resources we could bring to the community. So both Manny and I are working with the mayor's office and Linda Lopez to integrate all of the efforts to have a citywide plan, and we do plan to come back to this committee with that plan. And in that is also the mayor's work with LA Unified, because they'll be a key partner in providing additional services.
Mr. Fuentes?
So I just want to thank you all for facilitating, in Pacoima, for example, working with our FSC, El Nido, and getting Chirla into that location. And I think it's an example of sort of innovation and necessity. I mean, we know that we've got to do it, and we figure it out, and we were fortunate, Mr. Chair, to have the space to do it. I think the key thing here is, even as you all are developing the plan to get the information out, I think we really need to, at a very minimum, be able to refer folks to credible sort of people who've got the right information. I think back of my time dealing with the late amnesty filer cases and all of the misinformation that either, and it's not to demean tax preparers or notaries or lawyers, but we really need to be able to have these, I think, pillars of trust in the community. At a very minimum, have a sheet to say, here are the sort of regional places where you can get the information. And even better, Mr. Chair, if we can figure out how to have, and we're asking an awful lot of the FSCs, and I know that we are, especially with the subsequent items that we've got to discuss, but if they also had somebody there that could, not just refer, but say, here's how you go about doing it. And so I'm looking forward to the plan.
So a big part of that is the partnerships and being able to get the Cadessans of the world to actually to be there inside the facilities, the Family Source, Youth Source, and Work Source facilities, because they are truly the experts. Our agencies that we work with are largely not experts in this particular immigration field, so we want to make sure that all information that they're giving is credible, has been vetted, and it is with the experts that we're currently working with.
Sure. And I just would say that, the step one of sort of just getting the information out to folks of sort of who are the trusted people until we figure out how to get them embedded, we really need to move quickly. I know there's a lot of concern always with liability of us in terms of who we refer people to and who we don't, but this one's one where we ought to sort of err on the side of getting more information out as quickly as possible.
Absolutely right.
Great, thank you.
I concur 100%. On your youth centers, there's also going to be the re-upping on the DACA is one of the other factors that's going to be happening. The 2-year period will be passing, and so, we've got to go forward with that. Do you guys get in any activity with respect, I have a lot of young people come up to me with respect to the DREAM Act and the California DREAM Act?
Yes.
Financial aid at community college.
Right. And so, as you know, our Youth Source centers focus primarily on disconnected kids, 16 to 24, who are either out of school and out of work. Because we have LA Unified integrated into all of the centers, one of the primary resources that we were able to provide, in addition of getting them back to school, was actually getting their transcripts. And the transcripts was what they used for the basis of eligibility for the DACA applications. So during the first round, we actually held workshops directly at many of our centers, and then we had co-location as well during that period of time. So we're anticipating doing something very similar to that.
Awesome. Okay. All right. What's our action? Is there a motion? Is the motion?
Sure. I move that we go ahead and have you all work on the plan and come on back and report on timeframes for which we can expect you to get all this rolling.
Second will be the order.
And are you moving this forward to council?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. As amended.
That takes us to item number 7, which is a communication from the mayor relative to the budget for the 41st program year of the Consolidated Plan.
And we have cards on this item, Mr. Chair.
Yes, we do. Hello.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, council members. Kevin Keller, Director of Planning and Housing Policy with the Mayor's Office, here with Jackie Rodriguez, our Consolidated Plan Specialist. We're delighted to be here, and the Mayor has transmitted the got confused again with the 41st year Consolidated Plan. We have a quick clarification we submitted. The budget is correct. There was a summary table in the transmittal letter, which we have updated for a difference of $19. Just wanted to call that out for the record to make sure we have everything accurate. First of all, we asked that we just wanted to call your attention to that. Jackie's going to give us a quick run through, but as you know, this continues to be a difficult assignment and a difficult year. Public service dollars, we are showing a 21% drop in public service funding in this upcoming consolidated plan. That's a drop of over $3.3 million in funding. And so as the mayor's office, we had to really work closely with our affected stakeholders to try to minimize the impact of these cuts. Again, this money is from HUD. It is a federal funding source. It is not an equation that we can increase or decrease. I know we've talked about that. We certainly can keep working on that. But we wanted to prepare a budget that simply was able to meet the amount of dollars that are available from HUD. So we have, we're going to walk you through that. We have submitted and transmitted the budget. We look forward to working collaboratively with the council leadership on this. And Jackie's now going to walk us through some of the main points of the Program 41-year budget.
Good afternoon. My name is Jackie Rodriguez. I am with the Mayor's Office. As Kevin has stated, I'm just going to walk you through some of the points. I'm not going to go through the whole comp plan letter. The purpose of the plan was to focus on objectives to strategically fund neighborhood improvement projects that can be completed within the 41st year. I will be talking more about that regarding the timeliness issue that we have in just a small little bit. The funding for this year is $132,718,006. That is the total funding available. That is a combination of CDBG, which is the Consolidated Block Grant Fund, HOPWA, Housing for People Living with AIDS, ESG, Emergency Solutions Grant, and the Home Partnership Act money. That is all four of the grants that combined for the $132 million. The planning process, to give you some background, began in about September of 2014. It began when HSID and the Commission of Community and Family Services convened community meetings to inform the public of the general plan process, ask for their priorities, etc. The meetings were held in Boyle Heights, Pacoima, South LA, and Central LA. During the meetings, the residents listed some of their priorities through different exercises they had at the community meetings. The priorities that they listed, or that more often convened through the meetings, were more need for comprehensive family services, affordable housing, services for battered and abused spouses, homeless shelters. Those were all seen as priorities for community members. In October of 2014, the Mayor's Office did release their letters soliciting applications from city departments for the Consolidated plan process. We received approximately 110 applications, totaling about $170 million, which is far less than what we have available. HSID LA did review the applications for funding eligibility and project readiness, and the recommendations were based on department review of the project eligibility, alignment with the consolidated plan, as well as community input. So this year, the city is also facing another challenge, which is timeliness of expenditures. HUD requires that the city retain no more than 1.5 times the amount of their entitlement 2 months prior to the program year end, which would be January 30th. As of today, we are at 1.56 of the annual allocation.
You said it was 1.5.
1.50, and we're at 1.56. So we're over our expenditure amount. HUD is aware that the city potentially will not meet their timeliness standard, and they have indicated to HSID staff that they will issue a letter, and we will have 1 year to correct unspent savings. That is why this year it is critical that these projects are shovel-ready and that the money is able to be expended. As you are aware, Kevin did mention the cap on public services, and the amount that was available this year was approximately $2.5 million, which was a reduction from last year. We are capped at a total of 15%. This year, that is per regulations. It is not something that we can change. The consolidated plan budget includes these cuts, and cuts were minimized to core public services, including domestic violence shelters, family source centers, and homeless shelter operations. Other critical public services will receive necessary cuts, not because we're seeking to impose these cuts, but because we have no choice in the face of continuing reductions in the federal funding allocation. The mayor's office looks to work collaboratively with the council on this, and we will be happy to answer any questions. And thank you for your time.
Is HSID staff available? Come on up, Rushmore. So I'm just sort of wondering out loud, Exhibit A, right? In the findings, HUD has got a concern about how we have not quickly spent the savings in the program, and recognizing it's only not 0.6% at the 0.06% that we haven't done properly, or I shouldn't say properly, timely. Give us an understanding as to what's happening. I know it's not just HCID, it's other city departments who, for whatever reason, haven't moved the money as fast as they need to, and we already have problems with HUD.
Right.
Why are we where we are right now?
Well, this is two things primarily, Councilman, and I appreciate the question because when both you and Councilman Cedillo first came into office, we were preaching from the get-go as HSID was taking over control of the Consolidated Plan, administering the Consolidated Plan, that we needed to make sure that we were making investments that were timely, that were shovel-ready. And for better or worse, over the years, many years, has been a practice of allocating CDBG dollars primarily to projects that were essentially seed money for fundraising in the future. And the can got kicked, and you, as the mountain of projects over the years continued to escalate, it's becoming more and more challenging to be able to meet that threshold. Now, several years back, the city went through an exercise of reprogramming to try to get underneath that threshold. We're at that point again. You add more years and more projects that are funded in that manner that are not shovel-ready, but they're more speculative, if you will. And not saying they're not good projects, they're just somewhat speculative in the fact that that this should be, in essence, the last dollar going in versus the first dollar in. Compound that with the fact that for a number of years, we talk about the community-based development organization model that we've been utilizing for years, where we were able to go from 15% public service cap up to about 37-38%. That means there's less capital dollars going into the community. Well, since we last year ratcheted it down to 15%, that means additional federal capital dollars going into the community. So you add that in addition to the years of investments of not shovel-ready projects, lo and behold, you've got a problem of expenditure in a timely fashion. Now, I will credit the CLA's office, our department staff working close with the mayor's office, and your staff in particular in helping us, working with the departments and the council offices to identify projects where we could spend the monies down, invoice as quickly as possible to get to this point where we are close. In some ways, it's a wake-up call for us because as we look to make recommendations on funding the con plan in the future, with 85% CDBG into non-public service, I think we need to be very strategic as to the type of projects we're investing in to ensure that they are going to be spent in a timely fashion. If you look at the Neighborhood Improvement Fund that will be coming back in a couple of weeks with the recommendations, it was written just that way. This committee and the council approved it, and it was designed to be shovel-ready so that we can get the money out the door.
Yeah.
And more, those are the types of projects we're going to have to finance in the future. We did a great job, like I said, getting to this point of getting close. We probably won't get there. We'll get a nasty letter. We've informed everyone. We knew this was coming. We did the best we could to get within the threshold, but I think that this echoes what we've been saying since we took administration of the con plan, that we need to go along, we need to reform how we're approaching this to be more strategic, to align our resources and have investments go into projects that are ready to go.
And so, to be fair, HCID, new department, CDD, old department, and so here we are. And to be absolutely fair, Mr. Chair, this isn't my first rodeo on CDBG. I'm just as guilty as a staff person to have sort of put money in projects that we thought would materialize. So I would just suggest that we start looking at projects where there are no longer council members associated with those projects and figure out how to free up the dollars as soon as possible, because they're gone, and these are the new rodeo riders.
And I just want to make sure that I want to make sure it didn't come across as if I was blaming the former community development department.
But I think it's your official second rodeo.
Yes.
To be fair, and so you've got to sort of work the backlog, as it were, on some of these projects. And I will confess that I did the same thing as a staff person and sort of put some money away and that sort of thing. But understanding that we have a problem and we need to be on our best behavior with HUD. Eliminate all the old pet projects from previous council offices. And come back to us to see how we can spend the monies down. I do have a couple of questions, and I should say more of a conversation with the mayor's office, because I think this process is one, again, not being the first rodeo here, one where we collaborate. You all propose, we agree, or we amend, and that makes it for a good deliberative conversation. But I wanted to get a sense for the reduction in the family source system, and the line item is reduced by about $300,000. I understand that it's difficult, but was that sort of a reduction primarily based on sort of how much money less we're receiving, or is there some other math that I'm unaware of?
That's correct. I mean, overall for public services, we kept public services by $3.6 million, and there was limited line items because of the former years where we took away all the CBDOs. So the line items, they were limited. We had to make cuts.
Sure.
Councilman Kevin Keller, if I'm correct, even zeroing out every single item except for domestic violence, homeless shelters, and family source centers would not have been enough cuts. So we had to give cuts across the board.
Sure.
But I think on a percentage basis, the domestic violence, family source
increased.
There was the minimal cuts. I think it's, like you said, 5%, 4 or 5%. So we understand even 4% cuts are going to be very difficult to absorb, but it's really the most focused trying to keep our dollars where we can.
Sure. And I know that we've talked about it before, but I'll just repeat it. We're constantly under threat at HUD for this sort of getting smaller and smaller, the pie, and we all know that we've got to live with that reality. But I'd like for HCID Rushmore to come back and report back on a couple of things as we're going through this iterative process. Along the lines of, specifically along the lines of 24 and 25, Economic Development Fund, there's a $2 million reduction. I wanted to get a report back from HCID as to why reduce it from $2 million, why the reduction. And also on line item 25, there's a reduction of $1.5 million to zero this year. Report back on sort of what's happening there and how we can make up for it. Let's see here. Line item 29.
Oh, sorry, before you go on, just as far as what's in the proposed budget, the department wouldn't be able to necessarily just tell you why a line item was
Sure.
reduced or increased. So we can perhaps provide you what the impact is and some alternatives.
Sure. No, that's what I'm asking for
Okay.
because I can't ask the mayor's office for a report back. They were co-equal in the process, but we
Make
would
sure I
like for you to work with them to tell us, the council, where we are.
Understood.
Line item 29, a very important project in Council District 14. And so I'm excited that it went from $0 to $850,000. So a report on sort of how important that is would be really, I think, helpful for all of us. Items 36 and 37, rehabilitation comprehensive last year was funded at $1.3 million and $1 million respectively. This year, $0. But it looks like item 38 is combining all of that. Is that what that is? Okay, in that case, never mind. All right, item 52. I'd like for HCID to sort of help us understand by council district how the handy worker program is working, and I guess that speaks to item 53 as well.
Okay.
How are we doing? Are we getting to everywhere that we need to in the city? Specifically for Council District 7, items 55, 56, 58. I'd like to get a report back on how Council District 7 is doing with respect to everybody else. That's a residential, it's a CARE, TARP, and citywide PACE program. This last December, I was recently reminded of sort of the need to have more proactive code enforcement with a devastating fire that displaced 21 people who were cohabitating in 900 square feet. And so, to me, that would be very important. Item 74, the Great Streets, a report back on how this funding is going to be allocated. I know that there's $2 million being shared amongst 4 districts. Is it pro rata or sort of who's ready to go, who's not? I think that would be helpful. Item 117, slum blight area documentation. I'd like a report back on this item, and how can this potentially benefit the city at large? And then the last one that I've got, Council District 7, the Sylmar Park and Haddon Tunnel and pedestrian improvements were not funded. Wanted to understand why those projects weren't allocated any funds. So we'll ask the CLA to report back, just so I'm clear, to work with you all, to work with them, to report to us.
Absolutely. And Councilman, where you would ask for specific information relative to Council District 7, we will, for the reader pleasure, we will provide breakdowns for all 15 council districts.
That would be great.
And if I may, Kevin Keller with the Mayor's Office, appreciate the report back on details. Since we are at the table, we can provide a little more, just a couple things you were mentioning very, very briefly. The Great Streets program is one of the, as we know, the mayor's priorities. The 4 segments of streets that were identified as the initial batch is Van Nuys Boulevard in CD7, Crenshaw Boulevard in CD8, Central Avenue in CD9, and Cesar Chavez Boulevard in CD14. My understanding is that's a $500,000 across-the-board allocation to each of those 4. And obviously not all the great streets are in CDBG eligible areas, but there would be a yearly kind of rotation to kind of prioritize that. Just to explain some background on that to help out. Also, the slum blight findings, we're very pleased to be able to fund some of those. As we've learned, those are very critical to ensuring that the CDBG funds can be used in wider varieties of ways that I'm sure HCID can explain. That is out of administration dollars, which are also not as tight as public service dollars, but we're very tight. So we recognize that that amount is not enough to do slum blight studies across the board, but the mayor's office did want to start that amount as it's grappled with. Maybe there's some tweaking that could be done on those numbers, but I just wanted to point out that's an administration dollar, which again is similarly capped in terms of a difficulty in inking that up, but that is not the full amount that was requested by HCID.
Right. It's just important to note to dovetail on what Kevin stated is that certainly with the issue of less public service dollars, having the blend swipe analysis done for targeted areas, once it's identified as a slum blight area, enables you to have greater flexibility for allocating CDBG dollars in that area. As some of you may have experienced in the past with small amounts of CDBG allocations, if you wanted to target a major thoroughfare, you cannot do so because even though it may be by and large a low-income area, the services that are or installation of equipment on a major thoroughfare doesn't benefit just those in that community if it's not determined to be a slum blight area. So a little bit of investment, say $300,000 or $400,000 for the city as a whole to identify targeted areas would then free up so much more flexibility on CDBG dollars on a go-forward basis. So it's money well spent, and I'm certainly appreciative of the mayor's office at least providing some seed money for one, maybe two areas. But beyond that, it's important to look at that from the greater perspective. This is a service that was previously provided by the former redevelopment agency. Now it doesn't exist, but this is certainly an option that we should be looking at in the future. If there's other sources of funds, if admin dollars under the consolidated plan are not eligible, something else, or there's not enough room, I should say. So certainly a few dollars spent there would enable us to have greater flexibility in the city.
Ed Gibson, HSID, that is accurate. Historically, we have used our CDBG dollars in redevelopment areas to a great extent, and that slum blight has allowed a great deal of flexibility to remove slum blight as barriers. So a lot of the work that various departments, council offices wanted completed was done under a slum blight finding, if you will, and that doesn't exist currently, so we have to go other matters, and those aren't as flexible for the type of work that at times we want to do inside the city.
Public comment? It's Timothy Watkins, Nancy Volpert, Eve Sheedy, Ben Shermer.
Hi, I'm Tim Watkins, representing Watts Labor Community Action Committee. I'm the president and CEO. WLCAC has been providing senior services since its inception all the way back 50 years ago. Initially, there was no senior service programs in LA. We did it by getting volunteers in the community to open up their houses, and we had what was called the Twilight Club. Seniors invited other seniors into their homes. We packed lunches in brown bags and brought them to them in those homes. And what we discovered was that when people are socially interactive, their lives become vibrant again, and they find new meaning. And that gave rise to us operating what is now more than a dozen congregate meal centers. Although it's been tough in recent years because there have been cuts before this for our senior services programs, we still excel at it, and we still meet our contractual obligations, if not exceed them. We're very grateful for the programs that we're operating that aren't getting so severely cut, but we're concerned about what happens. We're concerned about what happens for seniors in our community that are raising their grandchildren, particularly in Watts, and don't have the benefit of these services. It gets almost impossible to sustain.
Thank you. Nancy?
Hi. Hello. I'm Nancy Volpert with Jewish Family Service, and I wanted to first thank the Mayor's Office, the Council, and HCID for the tremendous efforts to try to preserve domestic violence shelter operations funding. I think we have had several conversations about the importance of those resources, and we look forward to working with Council to identify the additional resources so that we're not facing an additional $500,000 cut at the general fund side. But since we're a multi-service agency, while we're pleased with that, we're also deeply concerned about the cuts to aging services and the proposed 25% cut. As you both know, evidence-based programs are where the country is going. It's where our resources need to be trained, and those are the programs that are most likely to lose the funding if the proposed cut goes forward and additional or alternative funds aren't found. So while we are really pleased with the support thus far, we hope to continue working with Council.
Thank you. Eve?
Good afternoon. My name is Eve Sheedy. I'm chair of the Domestic Violence Task Force. I actually have a friendly message. I want to echo what Nancy said. On behalf of the task force, we thank the Mayor's Office, HCID Council for support of the domestic violence shelters. However, it still represents a decrease, and as Nancy mentioned, we look forward to working with you to hopefully fill the gap through general fund dollars. But we're basically here to request your support for the amounts that are written into the con plan to support the domestic violence shelters.
Thank you. Ben?
Yes, I'm Ben Sharma, Executive Director for Rainbow Services. We are a domestic violence shelter operation agency and also here in support of the con plan as it's submitted. As you know, the mayor, along with Chief Beck, recently made an announcement that domestic violence is up 20%, and those are reports to LAPD. I know at Rainbow Services, we're seeing a 41% increase to our hotline and a 54% increase to our shelter, so referrals made to the shelter. So the incidents are up, so we greatly appreciate the city's support in standing behind these incredibly important life-saving services. As has been mentioned, this doesn't quite get us back to where we're funded. We're looking at a major shortfall, which we will try to deal with in the general revenue dollars, but just here in support of the con plan as it's submitted today. Thank you.
Phyllis.
Hi, I'm happy to be back again and to let you know that there was progress. We spoke last year and we kept it going, and I just echo what Jewish Family Services had to say. Laura Trejo has been leading the way in evidence-based programs and particularly useful to the Watts and South LA community, where we have over 10,000 seniors turning 65 every single day. And for chronic disease, 75% of the nation's dollars is spent on health care, but only 1% of that is spent in the community. We've partnered with the UCLA University doing research in the community where they have written us into their proposals, so we are trying to bridge those gaps of personnel. Additionally, we also save from emergency room visits and also hospitalizations about $590 according to the study done by National Council on Aging. So these programs are working. We have another objective of working with the work source centers to provide a Stanford model training. I'm a master trainer to the CNAs in that community to be able to deliver these programs where there's barriers and fear to going anywhere else. So I hope that you will please. We're 212% over our objective as we speak today through the use of volunteers, and I don't know how we could hang on if that 25% is cut. So thank you so much for all you have done for us so far.
Miracle work. Thank you, Pastor. Tim. Parker Anderson. Raul, is this Raul Estrada? Veronica Olmos, Sherry, and Damon Lovelace.
Good afternoon. We're with the Coalition of Family Source Centers, and I'm Parker Anderson. I'm with the Watts Labor Community Action Committee. We run one of the centers in Southeast Los Angeles. The mayor's proposal was to cut the family source system by 4%. Obviously, we've heard a lot about the challenge that the mayor and the city has with respect to particularly public services with the overall 21% cut. And frankly, none of us want to be cut. None of us wants to see our resources diminished on behalf of our clients. But the reality is we acknowledge and accept that the 4% cut makes sense given what the city's up against. I do want to make one kind of closing comment. Overall, programs die either by large cuts in funding or a series of small cuts over time. The Family Source Center system was cut 5% this year. It's proposed for 4% this next year. The reality is that even with the cuts, we have continued to be creative, innovative, and to streamline our operations. So like this last year, Cal State documented that we increased the income to our families over $1 million. In addition, our cost per unit of service was reduced by 25%. So notwithstanding the cuts, we soldier on and we continue to try to innovate and be creative. And as been talked about here before, there are a number of additional things that we can add into the centers that even multiply where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts through immigration reform and some of the other issues. So thank you very much for your support. We really appreciate everything that was done last year and that is looking to be done this year on behalf of our clients.
Good afternoon, and once again, thank you very much for your support. You know, I'm not here on behalf of El Centro, and Parker's not here on behalf of WLCNC, and Veronica's not here on behalf of CCMP. We're here on behalf of the Family Source system. We've been before you before, and we know these are difficult times, and I know that. What I will tell you is that, you know, we're in this. We're in this 100%. We know that this is a difficult time and difficult decisions have to be made. But at the same time, please understand that we're committed 1,000%. Not only are we continuing to provide all the services that we initially started to provide, 5 years ago, but on top of that, we've also adopted a new LAUSD PSA program, a new LAUSD foster youth component. We're also working with providing a whole host of other services, financial and asset building services on top of the financial education program. We do that not because we're a glutton for punishment. We do it because that's what needs to be done. On top of that, as Parker mentioned, we know that we have to do a better job servicing veterans. We know we have to do a better job servicing families that are undocumented, and we're committed to doing that. So I really thank you for your support, and I know that we'll do a great job in doing that. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Veronica. I'm with Central City Neighborhood Partners. We manage the Westlake Pico Union Family Source Center, and as my colleagues have shared this afternoon, we're just grateful that the cut was minimized. Like they said, we recognize the challenges, and we do have the coalition behind us, and we're committed to continue to move forward. And we support the budget. I want to thank the mayor's office, the city council, and HCID. They've really been involved in this process, really working with us to create innovative solutions, as Parker had said, and we're committed to continuing that effort.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Sherry Revord, Director of Advocacy and Outreach for Partners in Care Foundation. When I was here last year, I told you we were building a network of community-based organizations to proliferate evidence-based programming for health self-management for primarily very poor seniors. We've made progress. The network is taking form. It has members, and we and other organizations across the city are in negotiations with major health plans. I can't name them right now, but major California health plans to create revenue streams to support and sustain this work. However, a 25% cut this year, while we're still trying to build this business model, will be devastating. It will eviscerate the infrastructure that supports these programs. Please give us one more year to make this self-sustaining, is what I'm asking.
Good afternoon. I'm Dawn Lovelace. I'm the Civic Engagement Coordinator for St. Barnabas Senior Services in the 1st District. And I could say what everyone else has said here today, and we could go on, but we just really greatly appreciate the committee's support to evidence-based programming up to this point. We know that the cuts could have been much greater last year. And but in the face of the 25% proposed reduction, the programs and classes are still growing in the face of that. And with losing the state funding for LAUSD teachers, we're subsidizing and keeping these programs going out of our general fund. So I just wanted to ask again that we keep the funding at last year's level and continue to fund it without any greater reduction. Thank you very much.
We have Wanda McGuire and is it Ryan? Mary Hurley?
Hi, my name is Wanda McGuire, and as a senior client at St. Barnabas Senior Services, I request your assistance to reserve funding for evidence-based health and wellness programs. These programs are essential in our efforts to keep seniors like myself healthy, independent, and contributing members of our community. The programs offered at St. Barnabas include chronic disease self-management, diabetes self-management, arthritis exercise, fall prevention, medication reconciliation, healthy ideas, and other relevant topics. Each of these programs contribute to seniors in my community living with higher levels of independence and added assurance that we can manage our day-to-day physical health challenges. I encourage you to continue and even increase the funding for EBP. An investment in EBP is an investment in the quality of life for seniors in Los Angeles and the community at large.
Afternoon, council members. Ryan Macy Hurley, Director of Development and Program Planning at 1736 Family Crisis Center. We are one of the largest domestic violence providers throughout Los Angeles County and have two programs that are impacted by the proposed cuts in the mayor's con plan. And I'm speaking on with respect to the elimination of CDO funding altogether, employment training, as well as the DVSO cuts. With so little affordable housing in Los Angeles, we know that employment is one of the proven pathways out of homelessness. And among victims of domestic violence, without the ability to establish independence and self-sufficiency, you're likely to be in a situation where you're forced to choose between going back to the batterer or another unsavory alternative. And so we're talking about people's lives who are at risk. Most of the housing assistance that's now being dedicated to victims of domestic violence and other homeless families in LA and the continuum of care at large is really focused on short-term rental assistance, meaning that victims are going to have to assume the rent once that assistance ends, and employment's the main way to do that. And I just want to remind you that the council back in '94 made a commitment to set aside $5 million of CDBG or home funds for the development and operation of domestic violence shelters. Now, we're in a very different climate, we know that, and I appreciate the very difficult task and the very difficult decision-making here. But the DVSO funds represent the continuation of a series of cuts. And at some point, these cuts need to stop. Otherwise, we're really jeopardizing the lives of women and children. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's have the CLA with the assistance of the CAO report back on the mayor's con plan, including the questions that were laid out by Councilmember Fuentes. 45 days? 45 days?
Is that okay? Yeah, all right.
Yes, Mr. Chair. The claim required with the CLA, yes, 45 days is enough time. Thank you.
Good.
That takes us to item 8, Mr. Chair.
Yes, item 8.
Item 8 is a motion, Citio Englander, relative to instruction to the Housing Department to report on the potential cost to tenants and landlords from the recommendations in the mayor's Resilience by Design report.
Yes. So who's coming up on that? HSIT? Are they the same? No. Yeah. Okay. Housing, right? So I need building and safety and housing.
And Mr. Chair, we have cards on this item as well.
Yes. Let me make sure I have them. You want me to take it 9 together? I'm happy. You want me to take it together?
That's fine.
Just 9 case?
No, that's fine.
I'm happy to do either one. So, let me say this. Obviously, we've asked you to come up. The mayor has his Resilience by Design report. We've all heard from Dr. Jones the challenges that would confront our city when this major earthquake occurs. And the mayor has, in his vision and his sense of duty, moved that we mandate a duty, a responsibility, an obligation to all the building owners. And that duty is that they have to retrofit all their buildings to ensure that everyone minimizes the adverse impacts and consequences that would occur should when the earthquake of a significant magnitude happens. That being said, I want to applaud everybody who came to discuss this at the council. I guess it was 2 weeks ago, because the attitude was a very impressive attitude. I heard, and this is what I reported in Sacramento last week, I heard building owners say, okay, we recognize that's a new responsibility, a new obligation, and we're willing to step up and meet that obligation. Help us figure out how we pay for that. That's what I heard the building owners say. Then I heard from some advocates for tenants, and they said, we recognize that these are significant obligations being imposed on building owners. We respect that, and we ask that we don't bear the burden, bear the complete brunt of the cost 100%. That was really impressive for the city to respond to the mayor's call. Then we had other leaders come to our office, union leaders come and talk about a different angle and perspective on this. And so let's be very clear as we move forward. Very clear. This burden of this new mandate, this new obligation, this new duty will not be transferred to tenants in the city. This is not going to happen. It's not going to be a pass-through of 100% to tenants. We will work hard with all of you here, and this is why we're here today, to find the resources at various levels, state, federal, philanthropic, market, to help bear the brunt of these costs so that we can move forward with this new obligation and responsibility that everybody has, and do so in a way that prepares this city to be prepared for the future. An earthquake that's expected and talked about at 8.0 would devastate tens of thousands of affordable homes throughout this region, of which unlikely would be replaced. And so we've had these experiences. Those of us, I'm an Angelino, I've been here, my family's been here since 1910 in the city of Los Angeles. We recognize what that means. We've been through many earthquakes. And so let's go forward with that framework, that everybody recognizes that this is an obligation, a duty, a responsibility, and that everybody is going to do all that they can to figure out how we share in this new obligation. And so with that, let's go forward. Building and safety.
This is Catherine Nwaskagaba, Building and Safety. In regards to wood soft story, there are about 13,000 that we are estimating to be wood frame throughout the city of Los Angeles. About 2,500 are about 3 stories, and the rest are 2 stories. We're looking into providing services, immediate services for these people to have them retrofit their buildings in a fast pace. We're providing guidance and so forth as far as workshops and so forth to give them an idea on how to design this soft story. For order to comply, well, actually, we're going to be providing notices for all the property owners. But we're doing it in categories of 3 in sequence of 6 months. They have about a year to submit to us whether how they can comply to the soft story. They have 2 years to obtain a permit or approval to go ahead and start construction, and within 4 years to complete the construction. For the non-ductile concrete, we have not gone and surveyed the buildings. However, UC researchers have a list of about 1,500 buildings that are identified as concrete buildings. We are estimating about 1,000 of them are non-ductile concrete buildings, however. We will have a specialized structural engineers that will guide the property owners on how to design this as well, and to provide the professional engineers to better assist them and get an expedited review. We will have public outreach as well, guidance, and websites for everyone to review. For enforcement, they have about, after notification, they have 5 years to provide us report on how to retrofit the building, or at least provide proof that it has been retrofitted. After that, they have 30 years to complete either demolition or retrofit to complete the process. See if you have any questions.
I see Mr. Blumenfeld. Do you want to join us up here since you're an integral aspect of this?
Over here.
Join us up here. Mr. Fuentes?
We're on item 8, right?
Right.
Okay. I guess I'm a little confused because the motion says that you all are to report to us on how to pay for this, basically. So you helped us understand, Mr. Chair, that we're not going to pass through to, or at least it's your desire to not pass through to tenants, and I support that. But the motion moves to have you all report on what the potential cost of tenants and landlords are. So how do we pay for any of this?
Oh.
Good afternoon. This is Steve Ongale, the Department of Building and Safety. The Department of Building and Safety was authorized and directed by City Council in this fiscal year and provided enough staff to provide a survey of all the buildings that Catherine referred to with regard to the soft story buildings. What we did not do is to come up with an estimate what it is that it's going to cost to retrofit these buildings because we really don't know until a detailed analysis is done. It is very difficult to know. We could tell you what an average could be based on the numbers, based on experience, on history, on historic records that we have, but we could not obviously tell you how much it would cost.
H. Sid?
Yes, good afternoon.
Yes.
Anna Ortega with the Housing and Community Investment Department. I can give you information on the existing programs and provisions and how they would apply. I do have some summaries. So there are existing programs under the RSO that would be eligible to address this. Two main ones. One is called primary renovation, which can be used now for voluntary retrofits. The other one is called rehabilitation, and that would be eligible if the City Council adopted a change that required the retrofit. So we have looked at both scenarios. So just briefly, the differences are primary renovation is for major systems work. It requires a tenant habitability plan. It allows 100% pass-through, which is phased in, 50% the first year and 50% the second year. It's capped at 10% of the rent for the unit, and it can only be used once in a tenancy for low-income tenants. It's amortized over 15 years, and it's a permanent increase. So landlords could actually do the work and use these provisions at this time. If the council were to adopt a mandatory retrofit that would also be eligible under the rehabilitation rules, which is for mandated work due to changes in the housing code, it also allows 100% pass-through. Interest expenses not allowed. That one's capped at $75 a month or 10% of the rent, whichever is lower. It's amortized over 60 months, but that can be extended to recover the full eligible costs. If there's any loan on this work, then the 60 months is extended for the term of the loan. And it's a temporary surcharge that goes away once the work is fully paid for. We do have in our records a few examples over the last couple of years where this work has been done voluntarily. And so I can provide you some general costs based on what we have found. The range per unit has been from about $2,000 to $5,500. the pass-through under these provisions range from about $13 to $41 under the primary renovation program, and from $28 to $75 under the rehabilitation program. So our costs were, in our data from actual cases, was relatively low, $2,000 to $5,500. We've also network with our counterparts in San Francisco who have a mandatory retrofit program, as you probably know. They're actually estimating a cost higher than what we have at about $10,000, and I understand that the mayor's report is using a figure of about $5,000 per unit. So using the $10,000, the pass-through amounts under these provisions would be in about the $70, $75 range. If it were the $5,000 that is being used to estimate the LA cost, it would be about $83 in one case, but that would be capped at the $75. So we do have a little experience with the voluntary retrofit.
And then you had a number at 2,000, 2,500 or something?
We've had 5
The
of these.
experience, right?
So the costs in the actual cases that we have looked at have ranged from about $2,000 to $5,500 per unit
So that's your estimate as to what the pass-through ultimately will be?
under the existing rules.
And under the existing rules, does it trigger the primary renovation rules, or does it trigger the rehabilitation rules? I assume that this proposed ordinance would change the building code.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So it would fall into the rehabilitation rules, where 100% would be passed through to the tenant?
Yes, it would be eligible for the rehabilitation, or landlords could choose to apply through the primary renovation. There's advantages to both. They would have to pencil out the math of it.
Yeah. Okay. But I guess the either way, there's a pass-through to the tenant.
Either way, there's a
Under
pass-through.
existing law.
Under existing law, and it's 100%, but it's amortized over a period of time, which brings down the...
And no greater than 10% on a yearly basis, et cetera.
Et cetera. And for instance, primary renovation may only be used once in the life of a tenancy for a low-income tenant.
Okay. And I know that we're on item 8, but item 10 sort of tries to change all of that, so we need to sort of consider that as well at some point.
Item 10, we're not on that, but it's based on misinformation, obsolete information. We no longer have major rehabilitation, and
Okay.
we don't have any 50% provision.
Got it. Okay. All right.
I don't have 10. I have 8 and 9. Should we talk about all 3 of them together?
No, I think...
You can't just ask.
Just 8.
Right. Hold on. Let me see here. All right. Okay. Mr. Blumenfeld, any questions?
No, I came on the next item, I believe.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
We're going to public comment? Right. Can we bring 9 in since they're
Certainly.
very intimately
Yes.
joined?
Item 9 is motion Blumenfield Cedillo Corretz relative to an instruction to the CAO to evaluate the services offered by Fig Tree Financing California First and any other similar agency which can be of assistance in providing financing for property owners to retrofit their buildings.
Can we have the CAO come up, talk about the PACE program? Yeah.
I'm happy to say a few words to start, if that's okay.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to go to public comment. We're going to hear this so that we have the full discussion. Everybody knows what we're talking about, and we're all talking about it together. This is one of the, when we were in the Capitol last week, we talked about options or menus that we would create for building owners. There is a legislation from last year, AB 1510, the Nazarian, that was a tax credit. There is Speaker Tony Atkins. We met with her and talked about the challenges that this program presents for us, and she was very committed and was going to look at this within the framework and the rubric of her agenda to create more affordability. We spoke with Insurance Commissioner Dave Jones, and he talked about going and talking to the insurance providers about the provisions of discounted insurance that might be made available. And then, of course, this is, we look to your leadership on this area, this program PACE, and how we can enable that program to assist us with this new mandate.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd love to say a few words about the start, and you, Mr. Chair, both in co-authoring this motion, and both of you in partnering with me over the last 5-6 years on PACE-related issues. Something I've been involved. I really think that the PACE program will be an important tool in our tool chest in terms of being able to finance the seismic retrofits that we need to finance. And as you both know, I've been very involved in the PACE program since '09, and I had a bill, and both of you were very supportive in the legislature to extend PACE, which was then a beginning program to remove the sunset on that for energy, to add water conservation. And then in 2011, when the three of us were also in the legislature, worked with Sandre Swanson, who then took my bill and extended it to seismic retrofitting. And three of us were all supportive of that. And it's a great example of now we're in the council, we can try to take advantage of the laws that we were a part of back then to do this important initiative by the mayor to really upgrade our housing stock. So this is a way through the PACE program where we can have a different type of financing where folks who want to get the upfront money can pay for it through their property tax over time. And that has several advantages. But one, it makes it affordable for folks who may not have the upfront money to do the seismic retrofitting. It creates also a synergy with other upgrades such as energy conservation, water conservation upgrades that someone may be considering doing on their home, apartment, business, where they can then consolidate all three and do some energy, some water, and some seismic, do one big retrofit, take advantage of economies of scale, put it on your property tax, and then over time, instead of that loan going against your debt-to-asset ratio, that goes with the property, whether you sell it or not. So that makes it much more affordable. So I think this is a tool, an important tool that we need to promote on the city to get us involved in this, and it's one that can be used. I should say it was one that even though it's sort of been dormant for the last several years, because after in 2010 there was a whole issue with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac where they said they wouldn't back any loans that were financed with this type of program because it would be considered a first lien against their property, and fortunately the state figured out a way around that through a loan loss reserve program that we can take advantage of here. So I really wanted to make the effort to come and join the two of you who have been champions for PACE for years, along with me together, to let you know how important I thought this particular amendment is, because this will create another tool for the toolbox to help finance seismic retrofits. And so thank you for giving me the opportunity to be a guest here in your committee and to speak my mind on this issue.
Thank you. Thank you for your leadership on this. Yes, please.
Sarai Bago with the CAO's office. We did some preliminary work with the mayor's office as they were developing their report. So we're happy to look at this issue further and report back on it. If you need additional details in the meantime about the PACE program, I think Ted from the mayor's office can provide more information.
Yes.
Council members.
Well together.
Just a couple of items. One is that there are 3 commercial PACE providers who are eligible through statewide JPAs to do seismic work. We've had discussions with all of them. They're interested in this market. They're interested in providing capital. Just the numbers that HSID provided here, you can see that this would be an expensive program, and we need, from our perspective, all the potential tools in that toolbox. So they're interested in this market, ready to deploy capital, and by opting into these programs, I think it would help us as you explore other things in Sacramento that where these kinds of financing programs could be leveraged. We could start talking about a different loan loss reserve, a different capital requirements, something to layer on to try to reduce interest rates that would really help with the cost of financing these programs. So essentially, on this one, the path forward is to, for two of the programs, is to opt in. We're already members of the JPAs that administer two of the three programs. And for the third program, it's to join one of the statewide JPAs and then have a resolution to opt in. One more item just for you all to consider is whether we would want to do that in an expeditious manner before the pass-through and the ordinance around the seismic retrofits was finalized, so that we can allow these providers to get in, start setting up shop in the anticipation of a potential mandate, or whether we want to keep it all a package. I sort of leave that up to your discretion and thoughts, but it's just sort of one of the things strategically that we've been thinking about.
Could you state your name for the record?
Sorry, I'm Ted Bardicki. I'm Deputy Director of the Mayor's Sustainability Office.
Mr. Fuentes.
So I guess I'm a little confused. I mean, I think that I think pace is really important, and we've had this conversation in Energy and Environment where we talk about, I think, the real opportunity in optimizing people's homes. And the more that we talk about pace, the more I think that we really need to start talking about it as a resilience sort of solution to homes, to to address crisis, whether it's the drought, whether it's weather, whether it's seismic. And so the opportunity, I think, is there, but do we then have to go to the state and ask for additional authority for the PACE program in order to address seismic issues?
No.
So PACE enables us now to be able to do that.
Because of the bill you supported in 2011,
right.
It was expanded to include seismic.
The Swanson legislation.
Yes.
Understanding that, we've been talking an awful lot about it, and we've been waiting for this JPA to come to a realization with the county. I'm sort of tired of waiting.
Yeah.
And I think that this conversation will inform item number 8 in terms of strategies on how it is that we finance the seismic retrofit. Mm-hmm. So how do we connect the dots here? Because I think that we may want to go it alone as a city of Los Angeles with our own PACE program or subscribe to a state one, because the amazing, important legislation, tick-tock, we are on the verge of drafting an ordinance, at least in item 8, instructing staff to draft an ordinance on seismic retrofitting and mandate it. But we don't have, I think, any real good sort of financing ideas other than this one, and this one needs to be sort of, I think, enacted or at least realized in some fashion so that we know that it could sort of accomplish what we're trying to do with the seismic retrofit. But it still doesn't get away from the sort of the conversation about how much ought to be passed through. I mean, if we subscribe to existing law, there is a pass-through, and I think that's either good or bad depending on what it is that we're asking the property owners, i.e. the multifamily, sort of property owners, how much we're asking them to sort of take on. And so to me, I'm really eager to hear from staff, how much it's going to be and how we're going to help those folks finance it and how much will be borne by the tenants. I mean, I think we're ready to hear all of that. So what do we do to get all of that information?
Yeah,
Ms. Baga, what do we do? From the CAO's perspective, I mean, I
Ask
assume...
the motion.
Yeah. So I guess that we need to move 8, we need to move this, and you all will intersect, you all be in the CAO's office and everybody else, and come back with a report that says, here's what it looks like?
If the committee so decides, we can combine the motions and do one report back, or we can handle them separately.
That sounds like an excellent idea. I'd be supportive of that, Mr. Chair, if you're supportive of that.
So then you'll orchestrate as we move.
The CAO's office can orchestrate and can bring in the other departments as necessary, and the mayor's office as necessary.
All right. So let's hear from public comment.
Mr. Bloomfield, that okay with you? Because I think they got to go hand in hand.
Yeah, no, I agree on that. I mean, my only thing on, as Mr. Barticki indicated, was, should we move expeditiously? I don't see any downside to getting us engaged in PACE as an option as fast as we can.
Right.
And then as we sort out the bigger question, which is inherent.
I think if the financing's on the front end, it's preferred because it gives everybody a sense of what we're doing, and then we've got AB 1510, which is still out there, which is another option, and then we've got what Speaker Atkins was thinking about in terms of helping us create more affordability. Many of us look at this as a part of a strategy for protecting affordability, and so within that prism, within that framework, this is how Speaker Atkins was engaged in the conversation in the Capitol. The pro tem was following the lead, so when we talk about Speaker Atkins' perspective on this, it's going to be the perspective of the legislature. And then that work's done, and it's just about the governor after that.
I suspect we will probably need to report back a few times as we develop this, so we could make the report back on the financing piece the priority and come back with that first.
So it would not hinder your work?
So I just want to be clear, the PACE part is all about providing financing to building owners, and it can move on the same track or a more expeditious track than what may be a larger conversation about pass-through or not pass-through, or how much pass-through.
Right, we don't want to fetter you. We want you to move as fast as possible. It'll give everybody more comfort, but we want collaboration, obviously. But PACE is, it's the program we're looking to for us at the moment. As I said, there's AB 1510, whatever the new number will be, and other support we're looking for. So if you guys, we can do a motion, but just as long as there's clarity in the motion that you're supposed to go as fast as you can.
Yeah, so does it help to have two separate motions so you can just move forward with PACE? And then I think we all view them as inextricably linked, but it sounds like keeping PACE as its own thing will make it not get tied up in the rest.
I just don't want
because there's not a lot that they have to do other than join.
I just want to make sure that you guys are communicating and working together, right? So that you do your work, and then they look up and say, well, that doesn't work, because we've got a whole community of people who are going to look at it differently, right?
Yeah, we've been talking about this for 8 or 9 months now. We're the CIO and Mayor's Office are pretty in sync on the PACE part, and so if you all want us to move ahead.
The CEO knows all. We work for the council and the mayor.
That's
know
right.
all.
Okay. So we got two motions.
All right.
With a clear understanding of that. Then let's get some public comment.
Thank you.
Okay, and then we'll move the motions after. Jim Clark.
Can't be the only one.
Jerry Acosta. Richard Al. Structural Engineers Association of Southern California. Sir, please join us. Sir, please tell me how to pronounce your last name. I couldn't read it. Yes, please. What's your last name, sir?
Hess, H-E-S.
Okay. You sure not a doctor? Just kidding. Please sit down.
3 masters, but no doctor.
And Joel Montaño. And we've got one more chair, Isaac Okupnik Cholsky. Okay. Gentlemen. Yes, gentlemen.
You want me
Yes,
to start since I was
sure.
okay. Jim Clark, Executive Vice President of the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles. Obviously at the forefront of this issue.
I applauded your disposition when we went to Sacramento. I actually praised the entire city that everybody was coming forward, willing to step up and.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your opening comments on this issue. It was very enlightening. I heard some things today that I wasn't even aware of. The Joint Powers Authority, very interesting pace we heard at the City Council hearing, and I think those are terrific options. Obviously, we need to find a way to fund this other than out of the pockets of the owners and our customers who are the tenants. We know it's going to take a lot of finesse, but as you mentioned, we're at the table, and we want to continue to be at the table to fine-tune this ordinance and then implement it. I want to just take some time to bring up a couple of items that we were concerned with. The 5-year period for implementing the projects, I think, is a little too short. We have yet to do an audit of how many construction companies that actually specialize in seismic retrofit exist in LA and the Southland. So if there are very few, I'm going to take up the time you used up, okay? If there are very few, we stand to possibly be gouged by some of these people, when the deadline starts coming to fruition. So I'd like to find out how many companies there are out there in the Southland, and then try to judge how many buildings we have that need to be retrofitted, and then go back to a time frame that's suitable for not only the owner, the tenants, but also the construction companies that are going to be implementing this. Again, since I'm out of time, I do want to stress that our organization wants a seat at the table to work with HCID, City Attorney's Office, and now CAO. We want a seat at the table so we know what's going on, because, and obviously, I think you understand we do have some insight to this issue that we'd like to present. So thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're next.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to make my minutes, so I'm going to give you these comments.
No. Oh, yeah.
I'll pass these comments over. Just one component, by the way, we commend the mayor in this program about seismic retrofit. It all makes sense. We helped pass SB 705 with Senator Leno. Once we had the San Bruno accident where 8 people were incinerated, we also passed SB 1371, where we asked that they fix gas leaks instead of venting them to the atmosphere. Methane is 82 times worse than car combustion. So we've been components of safety. There's a delivery system that's next to everybody's foundation that has natural gas, and that's called an AL riser or a riser. Some of those risers are fragile and they leak. And because they're leaking, that means they're corroded. What we're asking the gas company to do is that when they find them, to change them, either immediately or within 24 hours. Because they're already fragile, there already some corrosion. And in case of an earthquake, you can imagine that the whole engineering aspect of that riser is not going to be complied with. What I'd like to do is take one more run at the gas company and meet with their engineers, meet with their management, and this is not going to cost the city a dime. Right. We're going to ask them to retrofit those risers. When they find them, they should change them, because in case of an earthquake, they could be fragile, they could break. And these are below the shutoff, so there is no shutoff if there's a break or they start leaking. And one of the things we have to be worried about that's missing in the mayor's program, of course, is this whole question about gas infrastructure and the ability to restore thousands and thousands of people and to eliminate fires and explosions. So I'd like to get back to them, and then I'd like to get back to this committee about their report. I want to convince them. I'd like for them to do it on their own. That makes sense. We think these risers should be changed immediately when found.
Thank you. Mr. Hess.
I apologize I have to run, but thank you again for the opportunity to
Thank you for bringing this to us.
Part of this.
Thank you. Richard Hess is my name. I'm a structural engineer. I'm native of California. I'm not here to talk about the cost of this, but merely to discuss the seismic aspects. For one thing, this report is called Resilience by Design. There will be no resilience after an earthquake. Resilience implies elasticity. The buildings will not come back to their original position. They will be destroyed. I am concerned with saving lives. We have two requirements that I designed for. One is life safety. All buildings should be so that people can get out alive. The other is immediate occupancy for police stations, hospitals, and fire stations. I don't think this has even been considered. I think talking about resiliency is useless because these buildings will not be resilient. They will be damaged, and most of them will have to be replaced. Thank you.
Thank you. Joel or Hoyt?
Joel. Yeah. Joel Montano with the Coalition for Economic Survival. We understand the importance of the mayor's mandate to strengthen the city's pre-1980 self-storage and concrete buildings in preparation for the big one, because maintaining a safe and habitable tenancy is essential for our renters. What is very alarming to us is the fact that if this passes immediately, the current policy, as HCID confirmed, allows landlords to pass 100% of the retrofit costs to tenants, whether it be the major renovation or the rehabilitation. An additional $75 will be very added to the monthly rent as a surcharge will be very difficult for tenants to cover. It should be common knowledge now with the numerous studies that Los Angeles was one of the most unaffordable cities to live in for the average renter and much more dreadful for low-income families. All this happened even though, as the city has been informed years prior, that through the rent stabilization study that over 60% of renters are already rent burdened. With all these facts, why would we want to make it more difficult for renters to live in those properties that meet the criteria to keep a roof over their head? The priority should be for the council to seek alternative funding sources to make this mandate feasible so it's not placed on the back of renters through 100% pass-through. Please do not allow renters to be the ultimate casualty. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Isaac with the Los Angeles Community Action Network. Why was 6 afraid of 7? Because 7, 9, 8. That joke didn't make sense. Neither does the way this meeting is run. Anyway. How long have you been planning to get rid of rent control laws? 1 decade, maybe 2? How long have you been thinking of an excuse to do so? I wonder what other ideas you had besides earthquakes. Did you think of citing inflation, pest control, or other criteria that affect nearly every tenant in the city? I think this really has nothing to do with earthquake preparedness, or as you call it, potential seismic retrofit mandates. This is about using a convincing excuse that speaks to people's fears, boogeyman, if you will, to pass legislation that takes away vital protection for tenants. The city and landlords need to stop relying on tenants' ignorance of our rights and stop getting rid of necessary protection for tenants. Thank you.
Thank you. Omar Pai, Eric Harris, Ki Itsumi, Darian James, El Sabo. Mr. Pai.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a member of the Los Angeles Community Action Network. And I'm showing concern because, as you were saying, that we're in a housing crisis for more than 9 years. And my concern is, on top of that, is the amounts of rent that will somehow will rise if this doesn't get said or be shared to tenants that are basically low income and so forth. The regulations of rent is very important, and I just hoping that this could go a little more further to really comprehend the situation of tenants in the city, as far as dealing with the rehab of making sure that buildings are secure during natural disasters such as earthquakes. So, and that's basically what I like to share. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Eric Ades. I am a member of the Los Angeles Community Action Network, the Coalition Renters Day, and a lifelong resident of CD1. I really appreciate, first of all, you all waiting to vote the motion before public comments, or until after public comments. Thought that was very kind of you all. I just want to reiterate what other members are going to say today, which is that we just cannot see 100% pass-through to tenants. I am definitely happy to hear Chairperson Cedillo's comments that it will not be 100% pass-through, but we are definitely more interested in the devil's in the details, and so we would like to really get to some information about that. And as a previous speakers said, we want to see the table too. And there are tons of residents in my community in CD1 across the city of Los Angeles who are overly rent burdened, who cannot simply afford any pass-throughs, any de facto rent increases. And so, the mayor's recommendation is that it is 100% pass-through, and that is simply unacceptable. It is just not realistic for the residents who live in your council district, and across the city of Los Angeles. So we ask you all to continue to make sure that the pass-through does not go through.
Thank you. Mr. Otsonli?
Okay, I'm with Los Angeles Community Action Network, and I'm a human rights activist. I'm absolutely, totally against the proposal to do away with rent control on housing property owned by mom and pop landlords. Tenants, by their rent, already, even under rent control, collectively pay the landlord's mortgage, property tax, maintenance costs, and profits. They already have an annual rent increase. More and more people, especially those that are tenants, and the majority of people in this country are tenants, not homeowners, and much larger groups are tenants rather than apartment owners. Many tenants pay 50% or more of their wages for rent. Tenants don't get all the tax write-off that apartment owners get. I am against apartment owners' drive to abolish rent control in the city of Los Angeles, little by little, for greater profits of the already wealthy. Strengthen rent control, the rent stabilization ordinance. There's a lot of loopholes in it because there's still a heck of a lot of slumlords in LA.
Thank you. Mr. James?
My name is Darian James. I'm with LA CAN. What I saw here today was a lot of learned people doing a lot of good work, right, you guys, and we appreciate it. I'm sure the citizens do. But like in all things, sometimes things sort of fall through the cracks, and it seems like this was a little bit loose. Excuse me. Maybe what needs to happen, like you guys suggested, is that they need to come back to the city, to the council, to the commission, with facts and figures, with how much money they're going to charge people, right? We're talking about, we all know what the standard of livings are and what the economy is like in America. Big business is coming back, the little people are not, right? To have a proposal where the big business is going to pass the rates onto the little man and may even get funding and financing to support them, but the tenants, they don't get financing and funding. We don't even know what it's going to be about, right? The gentleman that was sitting over here said that he didn't know how much it was going to cost, and the lady that was sitting over there said she knew how much she was going to charge the tenants. Right? So maybe get them to get it all together like you requested. Don't pass it, please. Don't let them decide we will get back to you with the information. Let them come to you with the information, bring it to the public, and let us have the comment. You'll probably pass it anyway, but at least let us have a fair shot at seeing what the numbers are about.
Thank you. Mr. Sable.
My name is Al Sabo, a renter in the 14th District. I always thought that the RSO was to my advantage, to my benefit. But little did I know, as I found out today, that the only true people that are protected by the SRO or the RSO are the landlords. The same landlords who probably purchased these buildings to begin with, these older buildings, at bargain basement prices because they weren't yet retrofitted. Yet Today, when it comes time to retrofit, who do they want to pass the cost on to? They want to pass the cost on to the tenants who are already strapped and can hardly afford to live in the conditions we now reside in. To tell you the truth, what you're telling me is that they receive all the benefits from this. They get tax credits while we get screwed. I would rather have the damn building I live in collapse upon my head than end my life somewhere laying in the gutter in the streets of Los Angeles because I no longer can afford to pay the rent. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. James Porter, Carol Brook, Elsa Chigola, Harry Broom Hagel, and Azucena Paredes.
Good afternoon, council member. First of all, I want to say hi to everybody. How y'all doing? Okay, good. My name is James Porter, and I'm a renter. I'm a member of Los Angeles Community Action Network and a part of Renters Day LA. I support the need to ensure the safety of all of our rental properties, but I strongly oppose any pass-through to tenants for the cost of these improvements. Landlords are required by law to provide safe and habitable housing. If earthquake upgrades are required, then the landlord must do it. It is their building, it's their responsibility. Let's not forget that. If the city has to provide loans program or other funding, I support that. But tenants must be protected from additional rent increase in the midst of housing crisis. Please include specific instruction for tenant protection as you move the motion forward. At last, we need this committee to move forward pro-tenant policy like the ones the Rent Day LA platform. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Brook?
Yes, I'm Carol Brook. Is this mic on?
Yep.
Yeah. I'm an emeritus professor from the law school at UC Davis. 30 years, 40 years in law reform. I find myself here because I'm both an owner and a renter in CD 11. My retirement home is here. I learned to my dismay that it's extremely vulnerable in case of a large earthquake. And I've brought for everyone to see a picture of what happened in a large earthquake in Alaska in 1964 to a building of the same kind of structure as I live in, or that I own. I no longer live there because I don't want to end my days dead. But I certainly beamed up on the law reform front a couple of years ago when I learned about this. And in October of 2013, I prepared a 10-point plan for Los Angeles' dangerous non-ductile concrete buildings. By now, some of it is fortunately out of date because there is a mandatory program that the mayor has proposed. However, some of this is directly relevant to your topic for today. My points numbers 7 through 10 have to do with a lot of the financial considerations that you are thinking about, and it may be useful. I will leave copies of this for all of you and your staff. I did try to get a tax credit through at the state level last year and learned that you've got a problem with the chair of the Senate committee that has to approve tax reform, and at the governor's office, Lois Wolk, yes, the wife of a colleague of mine, yes. And so I'm happy to, with 40 years behind me of legislative reform, I'm happy to work in any way I can to help any of you. I think it's marvelous that you are determined to do a mandatory program. I had felt my other personal contribution today would be to say that there are owners who desperately want you to do mandatory programs. I cannot get my HOA to even complete a study about the seismic capacity of our 145 units, let alone retrofit. A colleague and I, a fellow homeowner and I, spent $15,000 of our own money and got the first part of a study that the board should have done. And it sure sounds like we'd better be learning more. They don't want to do anything. They want to be able to continue selling their units at high prices. They are head in the sand, denying the danger. And I would be so blessed if you all will pass a mandatory retrofit program for non-ductile concrete buildings so that I have a chance to retrofit my home instead of rent elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Elsa?
Hello, my name is Elsa Chagoya. I'm the Executive Director of Inquilinos Unidos United Tenants. We support making LA's housing stock safer and support the goal of retrofitting all buildings. It is unfair to have tenants bear the full burden of retrofitting costs. We're glad to hear you support not passing costs on to tenants. Other options must be pursued of helping to pay these costs. Los Angeles is a city of renters, and unfortunately, over 50% of renters are paying unaffordable rent. Los Angeles is the most expensive rental market in the country, and nothing has been done to address the housing shortage and rent burden in Los Angeles. Renters in LA cannot afford to pay more. Inquilinos Unidos is a member of the Renters Day LA Coalition, which has a platform of pro-tenant policies and proposals that would begin to address LA housing crisis. None of those are moving forward. We urge you to act on them.
Thank you. Harry?
Azucena first.
I'm going to go first, Azucena, and then it's going to go Harry.
Thank you, Azucena.
This is Azucena from 1LA and Preciousville Church in District 1. Today, you are discussing a measure that will increase the tenants' share of the cost of earthquake renovation. Working families are struggling to get by already. Increasing the cost to tenants will add burden to working families who need every bit of help they can get, but many don't qualify for help from the government. Their income is higher than the max, but barely enough to pay for one-bedroom unit for a family of 4. While you are talking here about increasing costs for working families, 1LA is thinking hard about ways to help them. On February 8, we are having a mayor action around affordable housing issues. Hundreds of people have already signed up to be there. We request and expect your attendance. On February 8, we are going to discuss rent stabilization and a potential measure R2, and come up with real ideas to be used to protect families, ideas that this housing committee should analyze and take seriously. Because 1LA is serious on housing affordability. Thank you.
Thank you. Harry?
My name is Harry Brown Hegel. I'm a leader in 1LA from St. Agnes Parish, which has parishioners in both District 1 and District 8. 2 weeks ago, we came before you with ideas around the rent stabilization ordinance. First of all, I'd really like to acknowledge that I'm impressed with your willing to deal with seismic retrofitting. You know, the East Coast right now is dealing with what nature has to deliver, and it's our turn, and you're doing it, and I appreciate that. I would urge that projects that already include affordable housing be given priority in the funding aspects of what's going to be needed for this retrofitting. That somehow we put affordable housing front and center and give them a break. I would suggest that the RSO process right now is complaint driven. I would like to see that elevated to where there's information in the Housing Authority about what's going on proactively rather than simply in response to stuff that's already happening. I think that would be a good step. Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, Mr. Villaraigosa is still around? Aaron Villaraigosa.
speak into the microphone.
There's another audience in the room and downstairs.
My name is Aaron Villaragosa. I'm from Fig Tree Financing. Just want to say thank you for the potential opportunity to serve as one of your PACE program providers for the City of Los Angeles. We offer both residential and commercial financing for energy efficiency and seismic retrofitting. So,
We thank you guys. We want you guys to be up and prepared and ready to go as soon as possible, and you heard the instructions. We'll pass motion 9 and then look forward to continuing working with you.
thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys. So here's where I'm going. We hold it. Let me send these people out to.
So, Mr. Chair, on item 9, I'm happy to move it so
Yes.
this way we can clear it from the thing, from
Yes.
the docket, not the thing, the docket.
Got it?
All right.
Motion 9 moved. Second, the order.
Mr. Chair, will the committee be taking action on item 8?
On item 8, yes, we will take action. We will ask Building and Safety to report back on the range of estimates of what it's potentially would cost to retrofit soft story units in the city of Los Angeles. I heard a suggestion today about how we could prioritize units under RSO, and so that's a thought that I'd like us to consider. If there's an ability to make that work. So that's one instruction. The second instruction is HCID to conduct workshops with tenants and landlords for input on the proposed retrofit mandates as outlined in the mayor's resiliency plan. And I would like HCID to report back on a new program that is specific to seismic retrofits with a recommendation on how we address the costs. To look at all the options that we had spoken about earlier, AB 1510, or last year's AB 1510, PACE, and the programs proposed by the Speaker of the State Legislature, and whether their costs would be engaged in this and how what actions we can take to alleviate the costs and burdens. Okay? All right.
Happy to second that.
Let's get a report. We're going to hold the item here and continue it for 30 days.
That was
Okay.
item number 8.
That's item number 8. Okay.
Item number 9 is going forward to council.
Yes, item 9 is going forward to council. I'll do haste. And there's an item 10.
Yes, item 10 is a motion par singulator relative to instructions of the CAO, Department of City Planning, Housing Department, and a request of the city attorney regarding reevaluating reporting with recommendations to modify or eliminate the portion of the city's existing ordinance on major rehabilitation of residential units.
Okay. Who has that?
And we have speaker cards on this item as well.
I've got 2 cards here. You have any more for me?
No, just those 2, sir.
Mr. Wesley Walker Jr. Okay. And then Ms. Leslie Radford.
Hi, I'm back again from the LA Anti-Eviction campaign, and this time I come to you also as an RSO renter. First of all, I want to thank you for not entertaining this motion. But I do want to point out a few things that some folks have said before about RSO housing and pass-throughs. First of all, yes, and renters need to be involved in any discussion of any systemic pass-throughs to renters. I think that goes without saying. Most of LA is unaffordable housing. Most renters are paying over 50% of their rent. I'm sure that figure is higher for RSO folks like myself. What else do I want to say? I live in a building that is almost as old as I am. It's worth $240,000 on the open market, and it has 9 units. It's looking at about $60,000 worth of retrofit would be a rough estimate, which means that for each person in that building, we're looking at $6,600 investment. If I may have another second here, I get none of the equity in that investment. I get none of the tax deductions in that investment. And given that renters turn over, according to the U.S. Census, at 48% every year, the chances of me actually benefiting from this investment are very slim. I'd want to point out to this group that $75 a month is a 2% increase in the average renter's income. 2% of $44,000.
Thank you. This note and file. So we're going to note and file motion 9. As it's
Receive and file would be the appropriate.
receive and file motion 10, as it is encompassed in the previous two motions. Okay. And we have, I was wondering why you didn't speak earlier. It's okay. No, it's okay. I'm going to call you up right now, and then you come up and say what you have to say.
All right, now?
Now? Now's your time.
Okay, here we go. Oh, let's go. Yeah, hi. My name is Bill Huey. I'm the president of the Fair Housing Coalition. We're an organization of landlords who believe in equality under the law for landlords and renters. One of our landlords has had an argument with housing for about 10 years. Now, I'm not saying I know who's right and wrong here. But what happened is he sued housing and went to court, and the judge issued a writ to leave him alone unless his time is coming up for systematic code enforcement or a tenant calls up with a complaint. The housing, I guess, so infuriated they got beaten in court, they went to another judge, got a writ to go back and inspect all his units. I went there with my video camera. They called the cops to chase me away, but I proved them in the media. The housing department brought a locksmith, and for tenants who were not home, they opened up the lock and went inside. Imagine the thrill of coming home from work and seeing your apartment door opened up, and you think it's a burglar. No, it was the housing department. Now, I talked to Mr. Rushmore Cervantes. He said, oh, it's perfectly legal. I'm going to take this all over the media in L.A. I did publicity for movie premieres for 10 years. Got a lot of friends in media. This is going to be very, I bet you none of the tenants in this room think that's a good idea. I can understand the housing being mad at somebody. I don't know who the big good guy or bad guy is, but to involve the tenants in breaking all their apartments, especially when tenants had signs on the door, everything is okay in my apartment, please don't come in, I'm at work. They even went in on one lady who was taking a shower. She comes out with her baby, and 7 men are walking around her apartment opening drawers. And she freaked out. If you want to see the video of them breaking in, go to fairhousingcoalition.com. Top right of the screen, there's a click. There's a Filipino lady holding her baby. I would love to say that this committee wants to work with me to prevent that again, but I have to go all over the media in L.A., and I know it's going to stir up some stuff. So if anybody wants to say this is a good or bad idea, I'll welcome you to the conversation. I just don't think the LHD should be harassing the tenants when they're mad at the landlord. And, I mean, this to me blows my, it's like Nazi Germany or something, you know? I mean, you know, and also you come home, what if things are missing? Who do you go after?
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Oh, do we need to adjourn the meeting?
Chair will receive a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Motion be the order of the day. Thank you.